Hi, my name's Colin Kelly. I'm the Managing Director of Comsteria. We're a training and consultancy company. You can find out all about us at comsteria.co.uk. And one of the things that we do is we help organisations make their own podcasts. And I'm making this video right now for you because your comms team would like your organisation to have a podcast and they'd like you to be on it. But communications professionals, well, first of all, they're quite busy. And secondly, I always find them very nice and friendly people. And that means sometimes, even though inside they might be feeling pissed off and frustrated, they sometimes feel a little awkward telling you, for the umpteenth time, some basic things to keep in mind when you're on a podcast. So I have been asked to deliver this information on their behalf. And one of the first things I must stress is that a podcast is not a Teams call. Because on a Teams call, you can sit back and you can tap your pen and you can tut and you can maybe have your phone and the notifications will be pinging and you could even take another call. I've seen you all doing it. But on a podcast, there's certain etiquette and certain behaviours that we need. And if you don't follow them, then the podcast is going to sound god-awful. And your poor sod of a colleague in the communications team, they're going to have to spend hours editing it. And because you're not giving them any extra time to do the podcast, this is going to be over and above. And it's not going to happen, is it? So to avoid all that, you need to make sure that you follow the etiquette. So no sitting back in your chair, no tapping a pen, no drinking a mug of coffee while your microphone's turned on. We need to perform properly. So rule number one, the single most important thing is you've got to wear headphones. When you're doing a podcast, headphones are on. That stops the sound of the discussion coming through your computer speakers and howling back through the microphone, and then we get this horrible echo noise. So wear headphones. They don't need to be big over-the-ear ones like mine, although if you've got them, great, because they're probably better. Even if they are just the little in-ear buds that you maybe use with your phone or when you're out for a run, that's fine. But headphones are really important. Rule number 2, never, ever, ever record a podcast in your kitchen. Again, ideal environment for Teams calls and little catch-up meetings and all that stuff, but no use for a podcast. The kitchen is full of hard surfaces and white surfaces, so the sound bounces all over everything and it sounds very echoey. It makes you sound like you're in a bin, so don't do it. Ideally, you want to be sitting in a room with soft furnishings. If there's a kid's bedroom, anything like that, it's going to be ideal. Even put a laptop on a little coffee table in your living room and sit in nice and close to it, okay? So don't sit back in your seat, don't tap your pen, don't tut, don't drink a gulp of coffee right over the top of the microphone, and wear headphones. Rule number 3 then is about the microphone. Now, in an ideal world, if you're taking this as seriously as I would like you to, I'd like you to buy a USB microphone. Bear with me, I'm going to get you one to show you. Thanks for waiting. God, you are paying attention. Thank you very much. Yes, this is the Blue Yeti USB microphone. Now, it's not the only USB microphone in the world. It's one of the best known. The downside of it is it's very heavy. See, it's got this metal base. It's a really well-built, sturdy microphone, but it is quite heavy. And it's about £90. There are cheaper USB microphones, there are more expensive ones, but the beauty of a USB microphone is it's dead easy to install it into your computer. You just pop this cable here into the USB. The other thing I like about the Blue Yeti microphone, look at this, see it's got this mute button, right? So if you think during this podcast recording that you're going to cough, you can just tap that button and you'll be muted, which is great. And your headphones can plug in straight in here into the base of the Blue Yeti microphone. If you or someone else in your family is also into gaming or streaming or those kinds of things, then the Blue Yeti is a great microphone for that as well. You can even put it on a stand too. Oh, and make sure as well that you get the little muff. So, don't swing around in your chair and tap your pen. Wear headphones. Don't use the kitchen. if you can, a USB microphone. Now, if you can't, if you are using the built-in microphone in your computer, that's okay. Not ideal, but it's okay as long as you're nice and close to it, and as long as you're wearing headphones. Now, here's the other thing about podcasts. I remember once in my youth, in my early journalism days, interviewing a well-known conspiracy theorist, and I asked him one question, and he spoke non-stop for 45 minutes. I was recording it on a cassette at the time. He filled a whole side of a TDK cassette because he never stopped talking. And me, being a humble, nice, really well-mannered 21-year-old, I thought it was rude to interrupt. Now, some of your colleagues feel the same about you. They don't want to interrupt you. They think it's a bit rude. So I am here to ask you, please, to keep your answers short on the podcast. Now, ideally, you'll have some sort of little briefing chat before the podcast begins where the communications department colleague will say, look, it's you and 2 or 3 other guests, and we'd like the whole thing to be half an hour. We've got all these different things we want to talk about. So, try and keep your answers to 30, 40 seconds or whatever it is. Once you start talking for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and you go on, and you run all the sentences together, that's not great, okay? You might have a condition where you just keep going. So you need to try and structure your thoughts a little bit. Do some preparation before the podcast recording begins. Think about what you want to say. Try and prioritize the information. Don't just give us a brain dump, And I think that because you're so busy and there's so many other things going on, and oh God, I've got this podcast I need to do at 4:00. And you haven't thought about it at all. You're going to bring all the energy from the boardroom or wherever else you've been all day, all the meetings you've been in, all the stuff that's been going on inside your head. Now you're sitting on a podcast. It's quite a different environment, and we don't just want all that negative energy, this brain dump from your head, straight into the podcast. So it would be a huge help, if you could take maybe just 10 or 15 minutes before the podcast recording begins, just to sit and just try and relax. Let go of some of the other stuff you've been thinking about. Concentrate on the themes that you think you're going to be discussing in this podcast, and it means you'll be able to give your best performance. Please don't think that you can go straight from, a Teams call with the operations department or exchanging emails with the trade union or other stakeholders or whatever it is you're doing. Don't think you can quickly, immediately shift gear like that, because I think it's really challenging. And again, it makes it difficult for the others involved, and it means that you're not giving your best performance. Think about this. Think about the audience for this podcast. Compare it to the audience for the emails and the audience for the Teams call you've just been on. Maybe even a more important audience potentially listening to this podcast. It's your whole brand. You've no idea who might be listening to this. So treat the podcast with the respect it deserves. And I know, especially just now, because there's so much of what we're doing is happening remotely, and we are using Zoom and Teams to record podcasts, and you've maybe been using these tools all day. So here's another one, so you behave the same. I'm asking you to try and treat the podcast as something slightly different. Give yourself a bit of time and space. Turn off the notifications. Put your phone on silent. Mute yourself when other people are speaking. Just relax and take your time a little bit. And I think if you avoid the kitchen, wear some headphones. If you're able to invest in a mic, and by the way, I think some of what I'm saying here, I think would also help with the interdepartmental Teams calls and Zoom calls as well. So I think it's an investment that's worthwhile. Not just the equipment investment, but also just in terms of how you approach it. It kind of concerns me when we're running training, and we'll talk to people that work for people like you or businesses like yours, and they tell us a little bit about their day. And they are, back-to-back meetings and Zoom calls and all that. And I don't think that's great. I certainly can't go like that and just shift gear and give my best performance. So I know that, work from home and that whole culture side of things will change and evolve, and for some people maybe Teams and Zoom is here to stay, for some maybe not so much, but I think treating these sessions with a little bit more respect, putting some boundaries around them, and I know some of you do, I think it's worthwhile. But please don't see the podcast as yet another thing. It's another interruption. I'll just pitch up and they'll take care of it. We'd like a little more from you, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity. And when we do the podcasting training, which maybe you or some of your staff will come on or may already have been on, we show them examples of leaders and organizations who have used the podcast and are actually really highly regarded as a result. It actually enhances their reputation, and when we talk about some of the themes that get discussed in podcasts, I mean, a lot of it is really about good leadership, and I know you are a good leader, so why wouldn't you want that to come across in a podcast? So I hope that I have said, in my slightly cheeky way, maybe some of the things that your communications department colleagues maybe haven't said, but I think it's all stuff that they'd probably quite like to say. So thank you very much for listening, and all the best. And if you do a podcast, I'd love to hear it, so please let me know.